The rain never faltered on Gravara 8. It seeped into every crack and crevice, a persistent curtain of gray that blurred the horizon and swallowed the light. The colony had long since surrendered to the cold, wet decay, its metal bones rusting beneath an endless drizzle that softened even the harshest edges. The dull hum of the old generator was the only sound inside the freight outpost, mixing with the rhythmic drip of water tracing broken pipes and cracked windows. Here, beneath layers of chipped paint and foam insulation, time seemed to slow too. A reluctant crawl. May Kane, known simply as Ma to those few who remembered him, sat alone at the bolted desk, his hands steady as they keyed in the day's manifest logs. His eyes flicked over the flickering screen, cataloging forgotten shipments, rusted crates, and data entries that no one cared to follow up on. It was a lonely task, one he'd chosen after the last shipment went wrong on Raleigh Prime when he lost his partner in a firestorm of chaos and betrayal. The silence suited him. No small talk, no questions, no expectations. Just the endless hum and the rain beyond the steel walls. His world was small, narrow, sealed away from the mess of life outside. The cold seeped through his thermal shirt. But Ma welcomed it. It was simpler to feel numb than to feel loss. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft tap, barely more than a whisper at the front access panel. He froze, muscles tightening. The sector was sealed. No transports, no traders. The outpost was supposed to be a dead zone. Another knock, quieter this time, almost hesitant, like a question posed in the dark. Heart pounding against his ribs. Ma rose and moved toward the door, his fingers hovering over the manual override. The external camera flickered, static washing out any hope of a clear image. He unlatched the panel with a slow, deliberate motion, bracing himself against the damp chill. The door creaked open, revealing a fragile figure swathed in layers of tattered fabric. A child, barefoot and drenched, her skin an unnatural lavender that deepened to bluish hues at her joints from cold and neglect. Her silver-blue eyes locked onto his, steady and unblinking, as if she carried the weight of too many storms already weathered. "Please, human," she whispered, voice soft but unwavering. "Be my dad and my mom's husband." Ma's breath caught. No fear, no pleading, just a calm desperation that felt rehearsed, like lines learned to survive a world that didn't want her. Behind her, slumped against the support beam, was a woman barely clinging to consciousness. Bruised violet beneath pale skin, tangled white hair plastered against her collarbone. Her chest wrapped in ship canvas, her body shivering, broken. No shoes, no cover, no hope. The child slipped a torn data sheet from her sleeve and offered it to Ma. His eyes scanned the cold, clinical text, unclaimed biological asset. Status, discarded. Origin, hybrid RNA Allen. Retention priority, none. Offspring, 1. His chest tightened with a weight heavier than the rain. This was no trick. No gamble. Just abandonment, systematic, legal, brutal. The kind no one spoke of in daylight. Ma stepped aside. The girl nodded once, small and practiced, then turned to help her mother inside. The woman stumbled, but Ma caught her arm, cold and fragile, steadying her with a care he didn't expect to give. Inside, the cramped warmth of the back storeroom awaited, an island in the relentless storm. The heater hummed quietly in the corner, the faintest promise of reprieve, as the door closed behind them, sealing out the cold and the rain. Ma's solitude fractured for the first time in 614 days. In the silent space between drips and machine hums, a fragile new presence breathed life. A family, whispered into being by a child's desperate plea and a man's reluctant compassion. And the rain kept falling, indifferent but unbroken, As something began to grow inside the cold freight outpost, something like hope, the storeroom was a narrow sanctuary, barely more than a cramped alcove behind stacks of rusted crates and forgotten cargo. The faint orange glow of the portable heater cast long shadows over the tired faces of the two newcomers as they settled in. Ma watched as the child Z curled near the heat source, her silver blue eyes flickering with a quiet resilience that both unsettled and intrigued him. Her wet robe steamed softly where it clung to her skin, fragile yet unyielding. Narrow dash, Na RL, as Ma would learn to call her, was far more fragile in appearance, her body trembling as if even the faintest gust might break her. Her skin was pale violet, bruises fading into the past, but still etched like scars of survival. She didn't speak much, only closing her eyes briefly as exhaustion threatened to claim her. Her breathing was shallow enough to remind Ma that she was barely holding on. Ma handed Z a towel, watching the girl accept it without hesitation, but with a weight of unspoken caution. There was no gratitude, no smile, just a survivalist's calm acceptance. Then he offered a protein pack and a water bottle, careful to wait for a silent nod from Gnarl before Z began to eat. She took the bites quickly, hungrily, eyes never leaving. Ma, as if memorizing the contours of a man who might be her last refuge. The silence that filled the room was no longer empty but charged, thick with unsaid words and fragile trust. Ma felt it seep into his bones, the way the presence of others could fill a hollow space he hadn't realized was aching for company. He turned away, clearing space on a battered crate to serve as a makeshift chair. Sitting, he tried to return to his manifest entries, fingers hovering uncertainly over the keys. The screen beeped, awaiting input, but the routine no longer held meaning. He backspaced the last entry and closed the file. Outside the small window, the relentless rain beat down, but inside, the cold seemed to ebb just a little. Ma's mind raced with questions he dared not voice. Where had they come from? Why here, to this forgotten outpost? The girls whispered. Plea echoed again, softer now, but no less desperate. He hadn't spoken to another human in 3 weeks. Now, two strangers lay asleep mere meters away, vulnerable, dependent. The heater's hum filled the silence, while Z drifted into uneasy sleep, her body curling into itself for warmth. Gnarl remained upright, eyes half closed, hands pressed against her knees, as if bracing for something unseen. The weight of her presence was heavy, not with demands or accusations, but with quiet expectancy. Ma glanced toward the door, cracked open slightly, letting the rain's mist drift inside like a ghost. He hesitated, then chose not to close it. Maybe someone else would come. Maybe no one would. For now, he left it open in unspoken invitation, a break in the fortress he'd built around himself. He stayed awake long into the night, boots on, sitting stiff and alert. The dark monitor flickered, casting dim light over the room. From the storeroom came soft rustling and the faint scratch of a stylus on a tablet C, sketching in the quiet. That small, steady sound was a fragile tether to normalcy, and Ma found himself clinging to it. Despite the exhaustion, sleep eluded him. His thoughts were no longer just numbers and manifests, but flickered with the tentative possibility of something new, something dangerously like hope. For the first time in a long time, the solitude felt different. It felt full. The dawn, or whatever faint semblance of morning Dravara ate, grudgingly offered, arrived, not with warmth or light, but as a subtle shift in the rain's endless cadence. The steel walls of the freight outpost groaned with the slow change of temperature, and the low blue glow of the status monitor blinked awake in the dim. Ma stood near the heater, watching the power cell's steady hum. The small sanctuary he'd carved out felt smaller now, crowded in a way that was both unsettling and unfamiliar. His routine, once ironclad and absolute, frayed at the edges with the presence of two fragile souls who had walked through his door and refused to leave. Z emerged first from the back storeroom, still wrapped in her oversized, damp robe, hands carefully clutching a cracked data and stylus. Her eyes, the striking silver-blue orbs that had pierced his heart just hours before, remained fixed on her drawing, as though the act itself was a shield and a language all at once. She said nothing, her quiet focus untouched by the world's. Wait. Behind her, Narrow moved more slowly, the faint scrape of fabric against metal, punctuating her careful steps. She wore the gray thermal shirt Ma had set aside the night before, clinging unevenly to her thin frame. Her white hair, tangled and matted the day before, was now braided loosely over one shoulder. The healing bruises on her arms and legs were still visible, but she carried herself with a quiet dignity that seemed to grow with each passing moment. Their eyes met for a lingering second, a silent acknowledgement that neither was as broken as they had seemed. Ma offered a nod toward the small table where a modest breakfast of reheated grain waited. "It's basic, but it's hot," he said quietly. Without hesitation, Narrow moved to sit on a crate-termed chair, pulling her knees close as Z knelt on the floor beside her, clutching a plate. They ate in companionable silence, not uncomfortable, but a space between people unaccustomed to sharing words so early in their tentative family. Ma observed them closely. He saw how Narrow's gaze flicked nervously around the room, not with suspicion, but as if trying to map out what staying here might mean. Z, for her part, seemed absorbed in her drawings, hands moving deftly to piece together fragments of a world they were only just beginning to inhabit. Breaking the quiet, Z whispered, "She's sick, Mayek." Narrow's body shifted slightly, a cough escaping, low and dry, racking her thin frame. Ma reached for the water bottle, placing it just within her reach. She blinked slowly, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Ma's throat tightened as he tried to swallow the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "Where did you come from?" he asked gently. Z's voice was soft but clear. There was a station near the market. We stayed under the loading dock at night. They gave us soup, but then they said we had to leave. Narrow stirred behind them, fingers flexing as if to grasp something solid in the shifting fog of her memories. She inhaled deeply, then coughed again, the harsh sound breaking the fragile calm. Ma placed the water bottle beside her and watched her carefully. After a long pause, Narrow said, "I'll wash, and we'll go." Ma shook his head. "You don't need to?" Her eyes met his, searching for something in the silence between the words. "I don't want her to hear me beg again," Narrow said quietly, voice rough from disuse. "Just say what we owe you." Ma felt a pang of something he hadn't named: guilt, compassion, something raw and uncomfortable. "There's no price." She frowned, skepticism deepening the lines of her face, but said nothing more. Instead, she stood slowly, wobbling briefly as she balanced on bare feet scarred by the unforgiving ground outside. Bruises and faded scrapes marred her legs, reminders of journeys neither kind nor forgiving. Ma motioned toward the small hygiene stall. "You can clean up. Water's limited, but it runs." She nodded without hesitation and disappeared behind the fogged glass door, the sound of running water soon filling the small space. Outside, May sat down again, his gaze drifting to Z, who had resumed her quiet drawing, eyes fixed with quiet determination on the tablet. For a brief moment, the rain softened outside as if the world itself paused to breathe. And inside the freight outpost, among battered crates and flickering monitors, a fragile peace had begun to take root. Steam curled softly from the edges of the shower stall, muffling the sounds of Narrow's careful movements within. The faint trickle of water whispered against the cold steel, washing away the grime of long nights spent on unforgiving ground and in the shadows. When the door slid open, she stepped out into the muted light of the freight unit, skin flushed from the yachts. Warmth, hair clinging damply to her shoulders. The gray thermal shirt Ma had left for her clung to her in places, loose in others, framing the slender curves of a body that had known more pain than comfort. Her bare feet made soft, deliberate taps against the metal floor as she moved forward, eyes meeting Ma's with a quiet resolve. "I cleaned myself," she said softly, voice rough but steady. "I smell better now." Ma's throat tightened, not from desire, but from a sudden unfamiliar vulnerability. "I didn't open the door for that," he said, voice low and raw. She studied him for a long moment, then stepped closer, the faintest tremor in her hand betraying her guarded heart. "Then why did you?" His answer was simple but honest. "Because no one else did." The words hung between them, heavy and unspoken. She turned away first, pulling the damp shirt tighter around herself. But something in her posture shifted a subtle easing of tension, a crack in the armor she wore so fiercely. "I'm not useful anymore," she said quietly, voice barely, above a whisper. "Not in the way I was designed to be." Ma blinked, the weight of that confession pressing down on him. "That wasn't your choice." She gave a bitter smile, dark and sharp. "Nothing about my body ever was." Z sat cross-legged near the heater, silent and still, watching the exchange with those piercing silver-blue eyes. The child's presence was a steady anchor in the swirling uncertainty. "You're not a machine," Ma said firmly, stepping closer until their shoulders nearly touched. "Not to me." For a moment, Narrow's defenses faltered. Her eyes glistened with something unspoken, perhaps disbelief, perhaps hope. Then she turned, settling beside Z and wrapping the towel around herself with quiet dignity. "I don't want to be fixed," she whispered. "Just to stop walking in the rain." The weight of her words settled over Ma, stirring a deep ache in his chest. For so long, he had worn his own scars in silence, masking the loneliness with routine and detachment. Now, standing here in the warmth of a dim freight unit, he realized something profound was unfolding, the fragile beginnings of something more. Later, as Z drifted into sleep, curled near the heater with the cracked tablet resting on her knees, Ma and Narrow sat side by side on the cot. The shared silence between them was not empty, but filled with tentative trust and unspoken promises. Ma's hand hovered uncertainly over hers, then settled gently, fingers closing around hers with careful tenderness. "Okay," he whispered. "Then let's choose each other one day at a time." She pressed her forehead to his chest, breath warm and steady, no longer a stranger but a partner in a fragile new family forged in the relentless rain of Dravara. Outside, the rain fell steadily, but inside, the cold had begun to thaw. The oppressive weight of the rain outside seemed to seep into every crevice of Dravara 8. But inside the freight outpost, a new kind of tension was building, quiet, taut, and unyielding. The night had fallen into a fragile calm, but Ma could feel the undercurrent of unseen eyes watching, waiting. News had begun to ripple through the colony's shadowed corridors. The authorities, ruthless and unforgiving, were cracking down on unregistered hybrids, those discarded by law and ledger, ghosts in the system. Whispers of raids and disappearances had reached even this forgotten sector, stirring a simmering dread in Ma's gut. The risk was no longer abstract. It was real, immediate. Narrow paced the cramped space, her body taut with a fierce resolve that both frightened and awed Ma. The bruises had faded into shadows, but the fire in her eyes burned, brighter than ever. She was no longer merely a survivor. She was a warrior shaped by pain and defiance. "They won't stop until they find us," she said quietly, voice steady but edged with steel. We can't wait for mercy. Ma's hands clenched into fists, the lines of exhaustion deepening around his eyes. He had come here to disappear, to fade away unnoticed. But now, with Nero and Z depending on him, he felt the weight of responsibility anchor him in ways he hadn't imagined possible. He moved to the terminal, fingers flying over the keys, tapping into the colony's underbelly through audit backdoors and overlooked data streams. Sabotaging surveillance feeds, rerouting patrol scans, whatever he could do to shield them from the unblinking eyes hunting hybrids like prey. Z sat cross-legged on the floor, her tablet glowing softly in the dim light. Suddenly, her small voice cut through the hum of machines. Mom said I have to be careful, but sometimes I don't want to hide. Mom glanced at Nero, whose expression softened for the briefest flicker, a fragile smile ghosting across her lips. The child's rare powers, subtle shifts in light, a faint pulse in the air, hinted at a heritage far beyond servitude and discard. The corporation's interest in Nero was no accident. And now, Z was a beacon, however quiet, that could draw them out into the storm. We'll move soon, Ma said, voice low but firm. Find a place where the rain can't reach us, or where we can build something new. The three of them shared a glance, the unspoken agreement solidifying like steel forged in fire. The coming days would test their fragile bond, but they would face the storm together. Outside, the rain pounded relentless and indifferent, but inside, a family was preparing to fight, not just for survival, but for freedom. Beneath the ceaseless rain that battered Dravara 8, shadows stirred with intent. The colony's merciless authorities tightened their grip, and the noose around unregistered hybrids like Nero and Z grew tighter by the hour. Ma's nerves thrummed with urgency. Each intercepted patrol, each scrambled sensor feed was a step closer to the inevitable confrontation. Yet amid the tension, a hidden truth simmered beneath Nero's steady gaze. One evening, as the heater's amber glow flickered across their worn faces, Nero spoke softly, revealing the secret she had guarded fiercely. I'm more than they made me to be, she said, voice trembling but resolute. My genetics, they weren't just for servitude. I carry modifications enhancements that could shift power. That's why they want me. Why they won't stop hunting. Ma felt the room close in around him. The gravity of her words settled like lead, and suddenly the risks they faced were magnified beyond mere survival. Nero's revelation painted a target on all of them. Z, too, was no ordinary child. Subtle ripples of energy danced at her fingertips, flickers of the same rare heritage, a dormant power that could not be concealed forever. Ma saw the weight in her wide eyes, the burden of a destiny neither of them had chosen. The outpost, once a fragile refuge, became a fortress of whispered plans. Ma's role shifted from reluctant caretaker to strategist. Using his intimate knowledge of the colony's logistics and overlooked systems, he began orchestrating their defense rerouting patrols, masking their signatures, forging false leads. Every keystroke was a silent rebellion against the system that sought to erase them. They prepared for flight, for the desperate escape whispered of in hushed tones among outcasts, a rumored sanctuary beyond the relentless rain, where hybrids could live unchained. But the path would be perilous, fraught with betrayals and unseen dangers. Amid it all, moments of quiet emerged, shared glances, a reassuring touch, Z's soft laughter bubbling up like rare sunlight through clouds. Their fragile family, bound by choice and steel resolve, stood ready to face the storm that came not just from the skies, but from the very society that cast them aside. In the heart of Dravara 8's endless reign, a defiant flame burned brighter than ever. The rain hammered the worn metal rooftops of Dravara 8 as Ma, Nero, and Z slipped through the slick, shadowed streets, moving with the urgency of those who knew the price of being caught. The colony's familiar decay seemed more menacing now, every dripping gutter and rusted pipe a potential hiding place for watchers and hunters. But within the cramped trio, a fierce determination burned brighter than the relentless storm. Ma's breath was steady, but his mind raced, calculating routes, avoiding checkpoints, navigating through the underbelly of a colony that no longer welcomed them. Nero moved with purposeful grace, her body no longer that of a broken asset, but of a warrior reborn. She shielded Z, whose pale lavender skin glowed faintly beneath the rain, a beacon masked only by layers of damp cloth. Each step forward was a defiant claim on their freedom. The dangers pressed close, but so did the unspoken bond that tethered them, not just survivor to protector, but father, mother, and child by choice and trust. Z's small hand found Ma's, fingers curling tightly, anchoring him to this new family, forged in storm and shadow. At a quiet intersection, the world seemed to hold its breath. Nero stopped, pulling the trio into a narrow alcove, eyes scanning for threats. The rain whispered against the walls, the only sound between them. Slowly, she reached into her sleeve, revealing a small, worn drawing, 3 figures standing close beneath a shelter, hands joined. A home not built of bricks, but of hope. Ma knelt beside her, voice soft. We'll build that together. Z smiled, a rare and fragile bloom in the gray. They pressed onward until the edge of the colony's reach, where ruins gave way to the whispered promise of sanctuary, an enclave of the forgotten and the free, hidden beyond the rain's endless grasp. Though battered and breathless, they were unbroken, bound not by law or blood, but by a choice fiercely made and fiercely kept. As the sanctuary's lights flickered to welcome them, the relentless rain finally seemed to ease, as if blessing their new beginning. In that moment, amidst the shelter and silence, they were more than survivors. They were a family, forged in rain and resolve, ready to face whatever dawn awaited. The sanctuary was a quiet pulse of light against Dravara 8's endless gray, a hidden refuge where rain softened into mist and steel gave way to worn stone and sprouting greenery. As Ma, Nero, and Z crossed its threshold, the weight of their flight lifted, replaced by a fragile hope that had once seemed impossible. Ma's heart raced with a mix of relief and unease. They were safe for now, but the past had a way of echoing louder in places like this. Then, as twilight bled into night, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, familiar, and impossibly alive. Ma's breath hitched. It was the one he thought lost forever, his partner, presumed dead after the hostage incident that shattered his world. The reunion was a collision of disbelief and raw emotion. Silent tears traced paths down weathered faces as past griefs clashed with present miracles. His partner had been alive all along, working covertly to dismantle the cruel systems that discarded beings like Nero and Z. The revelation sent ripples through their fragile family, unearthing buried pain, but also forging new strength. Ma's gaze shifted to Nero and Z as new family, chosen not by blood or law, but by courage and compassion. The path ahead was uncertain, marked by battles yet to come. But here, in this sanctuary beyond the rain, they had found something rare, belonging. The relentless drizzle finally eased, a soft glow breaking through the clouds as dawn whispered promises of renewal. Together, they stood, father, mother, child, and the ghosts of the past intertwined, ready to build a future shaped by their own hands. In the end, family was not fate. It was forged. It was chosen. And in the heart of Dravara 8, beneath skies that had once seemed unyielding, a new dawn was born.